I am very lucky. I get to know a lot of fantastic people. This is Stephanie Race. Please listen to Stephanie. She is a world leading figure in many, many aspects, and she works with some great people. One of them being Robert Kennedy. And I want you to listen to what she has to say. Please share, comment, and follow these people because they're very, very interesting.
Good morning. It's Monday. It's the 3rd of March. Just checking in with you. I had an interesting weekend, had an opportunity to catch up with RFK Jr. for a discussion about making America healthy again and what it means for the U.S. and the global food system. Clearly, we have an opportunity ahead of us, and we have challenges. The opportunity that we have is to make America healthy again through integrating regenerative agriculture practices with how food is produced and providing for transparent information all the way through to the consumer so that people understand not just what they're eating, but how it was grown and how it connects to their livelihood in terms of their own personal human health. And that's one of the things that we do at Earth Analytics Group. We connect the soil microbiome to food quality through to the gut microbiome of human beings. We started out by monitoring the environmental impact of food production, but time goes by and you learn more about what people actually want. The food companies and supermarkets are more interested in keeping the supply chain running and understanding what the in-season yield forecasts are, as opposed to just understanding the environmental footprint of how food is produced. Why? Because traditionally it hasn't affected the cost of production, which is one of the challenges that we have in the world right now, is we haven't been pricing the externalities of the environment into how food is produced. And we're doing that through our true cost accounting solutions at Earth Analytics Group. There is an opportunity in terms of getting ultra-processed food more clearly defined and being very clear about the need to eliminate heavy metals and pollution and getting them out of the food system, getting rid of toxins, getting rid of added sugar and excess salt that exists in processed foods, and moving towards front of package labeling to help consumers understand more about how their food is produced. Clearly, the new tariff policy by the Trump administration will make food cost more, and food price inflation is inevitable given what's happening in the world with scarcity of natural resources. But preparing for volatility is different than preparing for uncertainty. And I'll have a follow-up podcast on that and another series of videos talking about food price inflation and what to prepare for. Clearly, there's an opportunity with bioengineering, which is the manipulation of traits or breeding for specific traits into crop plants to overcome limitations in the environment due to climate change, things like drought and heat, and how that affects the ability for plants to produce food, and where things can go wrong with genetically modified food versus using plant breeding as a tool to overcome the limits of climate change. I think there's a lot of confusion amongst consumers as to what the difference is between bioengineered system versus genetic engineering of two completely dissimilar organisms. You can have a seat at the table or you can be on the menu. And this is all about consumer agency, people getting educated about the science behind agriculture and how what they're consuming is produced. At the end of the day, it's up to you. Don't prepare for the future you expect. Create the future you want. I hope everyone has a wonderful week and a great Monday, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Did you think of Stephanie's fantastic little video? Next is Farm Theory. If you want to learn anything about everything, farming, emissions, give him a follow. He's absolutely fantastic. Listen to what he has to say by using AI.
The government is actively trying to force farmers off their land in order to hit their net zero targets, and we are going to use this 7th Climate Change Commission report to prove that. And by we, I mean me and ChatGPT. Say hello, ChatGPT.
Hello. Let's dive into this report and break down what it really means for farmers and the net zero targets.
Excellent. Let's start with dietary changes. What does this report call for in terms of the UK diet?
The report calls for a major shift in the UK diet, aiming for up to a 50% reduction in meat and dairy consumption.
And what is the alternative food that people are going to eat if they are meant to reduce their meat and dairy by 50%?
The report suggests a shift towards plant-based foods to replace the reduced meat and dairy in diets.
So if we're reducing our intake of meat and dairy, what is going to happen to livestock numbers in the UK?
Livestock numbers would likely be significantly reduced, aligning with the report's targets for lower meat and dairy production.
And what sort of percentage are we talking about?
The report suggests up to a 50% reduction in livestock numbers to align with the dietary changes and net zero goals.
And that's going to free up a lot of land, isn't it?
Yes, it would free up substantial land previously used for livestock farming.
And what does the report suggest is done with that land?
The report suggests repurposing that land for tree planting, re-wetting peatlands, and growing energy crops.
And how essential is this land use change from farmers using it for food production to large corporations using it for carbon capture to the entire planned net zero agenda?
It's seen as a crucial component, as it's intended to offset emissions and contribute to carbon capture, which are key elements of the net zero strategy.
So would it be fair to say that if the government does not successfully force farmers off their land, they will not hit their commitments on net zero?
It's a critical perspective. If the proposed changes don't happen, meeting net zero targets would be significantly more challenging.
Would it even be possible without forcing farmers out of business?
Meeting the targets without significant changes in agriculture would be extremely difficult. The report implies that substantial changes in land use are necessary for achieving net zero.
So essentially, it's either farmers survive or we hit net zero. Are the two incompatible?
The report suggests that achieving net zero may require significant sacrifices from the agricultural sector, making it challenging to balance both.
So ChatGPT, is there anything else we left out there in terms of this report and agriculture?
We've covered the major points: dietary changes, livestock reductions, and land use shifts.
Okay, thank you very much. You've been very helpful.
You're very welcome. Happy to help.
The reality is set out very clearly in this report. To meet the net zero targets, farmers have to be put off the land so it can be used for carbon capture. There is no way the UK meets its obligations without that happening. And the fact that we have something called the behavioural change unit within our own Department of Agriculture just proves that this is actually happening. They actually want to force farmers off the land. We as farmers are standing in their way of their net zero targets. And agriculture and net zero are not compatible. It is a war and there can only be one survivor. If farmers genuinely care about their industry, they need to understand that climate policies and net zero are their enemy. And if you're in any doubt about that, go and read the 7th report from the Climate Change Commission. It is independent and it lays it out in black and white. Our industry has to be destroyed in order for the nation to meet its insanely stupid net zero targets. It's actually mental what they're trying to do. Do you know that someone called Stalin tried something very similar in the 1930s? And it did not go well. He messed with farming and he starved half his population. We are an island nation and are already immensely dependent on imported food. And people think that climate change is a bigger threat than destroying our own domestic food production. How are these people so stupid? Keep up the fight. We have to win this war.